The great chamber of Nexus Prime had stood for 12,000 years at the center of galactic civilization. And in all that time, it had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of alliances, and the death of entire species. Today, it would witness something far less dramatic. Or so everyone believed. 12 elder races sat in their designated sections, their representatives arranged in a perfect circle around the central speaking platform where matters of galactic importance were decided. The Varric's Dominion occupied the largest section, their scaled bodies gleaming under the artificial lights, their four eyes watching everything with cold calculation. The Axiom Collective sat motionless in their environmental suits, their true forms hidden behind layers of protective glass and swirling gases. The Thrall Consortium whispered among themselves with voices like wind through dead leaves, their ancient bodies barely visible in the shadows they preferred. And so it went around the chamber, species after species, each one a power unto themselves, each one having earned their place through millennia of survival and conquest. At the center of this gathering stood Ambassador Kethral of the Varric's Dominion, his scales rippling with barely concealed amusement as he held up a data tablet containing everything the galaxy knew about the newest species to request membership. Honored representatives, he began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. We gather today to discuss the application of the species known as humans from the planet they call Earth. He paused for effect, letting his four eyes sweep across the assembled delegates. I will be brief, because there is very little to discuss. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the chamber. The humans are a young species, having achieved faster than light travel only 60 standard years ago, Kethral continued. They are confined to a single star system, having established only the most primitive colonies on nearby worlds. He tapped the tablet, projecting images into the air above the speaking platform. Observe their biology, he said. No natural armor, no venom glands, no psionic capability whatsoever. Their bodies are soft, easily damaged, and require constant maintenance. They must sleep for a third of their lives. They are susceptible to thousands of diseases, and their average lifespan is less than 100 standard years. The Thrall representative made a sound of disgust. Their technology is approximately 300 years behind Council standard. Kethral went on. Their weapons are crude. Their ships are slow. Their understanding of dimensional physics is practically non-existent. He turned slowly, making sure every delegate could see the dismissal on his face. In summary, the humans have nothing to offer the Galactic Council. They are too weak to defend themselves, too primitive to contribute to our sciences, and too short-lived to maintain meaningful diplomatic relationships. He set down the tablet with a decisive click. The Varric's Dominion recommends classification as a Category 7 developing world, with no membership privileges, no trade rights, and no protection under Council law. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, if they survive, they may reapply. The vote was swift and unanimous. Every single delegate raised their appendage, or tendril, or energy field in Agreement Category 7, the lowest possible classification, one step above, being declared a nature preserve in the observation gallery above the main chamber. The human delegation watched in silence. There were 7 of them, led by Ambassador Elena Vasquez, a woman of 53 years with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of the universe to be surprised by anything anymore. Beside her stood Captain Marcus Webb of the diplomatic vessel Horizon, his military bearing rigid with suppressed anger. The other 5 were junior diplomats and translators, all of them young, all of them struggling to hide their shock and humiliation. Ambassador, Captain Webb said through clenched teeth, "We cannot let this stand. We have to protest. We have to make them understand what humanity is capable of." Elena Vasquez said nothing. Ambassador, Webb pressed, Did you hear what they said about us? They called us weak. They compared us to animals. They laughed at us. I heard, Vasquez replied, her voice perfectly calm. Then we have to do something. Vasquez turned to look at him, and something in her gaze made the captain take an involuntary step backward. Do something, she repeated. And what exactly would you have us do, Captain? Challenge them to combat. Our best warship would last approximately 4 seconds against a Vorax patrol cruiser. Appeal to their sense of justice. They have none. Threaten them. They would find that amusing. Make speeches about human potential. They would not care. She turned back to watch the council chamber below, where the delegates had already moved on to other business. Humanity already forgotten. No, Captain, she said. We will do exactly what they expect us to do. We will accept their judgment. We will return to Earth. And we will be silent. Silent, Webb repeated, disbelief coloring his voice silent. The delegation was summoned to the main chamber floor to receive the official verdict. Elena Vasquez walked with her head held high, her footsteps echoing in the vast space as 12 ancient species watched the representatives of humanity approach, like judges observing condemned prisoners. Kethrol of the Vorax read the verdict with obvious pleasure, detailing every restriction, every denial, every classification that would mark humanity as lesser beings in the eyes of galactic civilization. When he finished, he looked down at the small human woman before him with something approaching pity. The human delegation may now respond, he said. You have 5 minutes to make any statement you wish to have recorded in the official archives. Elena Vasquez looked up at him, then she looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensors and perception organs of every species present. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20, 30. Finally she spoke. We understand, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Thank you for your time. She gathered her documents, turned, and walked toward the exit. The delegation followed her in perfect formation, not a single word of protest, not a single plea for reconsideration, not a single display of the famous human emotion that the elder races found so primitive and amusing. Just acceptance, just silence in the council chamber. Several delegates exchanged confused glances. They had expected anger, had expected tears or threats or desperate bargaining. They had not expected this quiet dignity, but the moment passed, and the council moved on to matters they considered more important. And the human delegation was forgotten before they even reached their ship. None of them noticed the smile on Ambassador Vasquez's face as she walked through the docking port of the Horizon. None of them heard what she said to Captain Webb once the airlock sealed behind them. Now we begin. Begin what, Ambassador? She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that made him realize everything about this mission had been planned from the very beginning. The real work. Captain, set course for Earth, and when we get there, tell the Directorate that Phase 1 is complete. They did exactly what we expected. They declared us weak and unworthy. They dismissed us as irrelevant. She settled into her seat as the ship powered up its engines. They have no idea what they just unleashed. The Horizon vanished into faster-than-light travel, carrying its passengers back to a small blue planet that the galaxy had just declared worthless, and humanity began to work. 50 years passed in the galaxy like water flowing through a river, carrying with it wars and peace treaties and the endless business of 1,000 civilizations. The Vorax Dominion expanded its borders, crushing 3 smaller species and absorbing their territories into its ever-growing empire. The Axiom Collective made breakthrough after breakthrough in quantum mechanics, sharing their discoveries with council members for enormous fees. The Thrall Consortium grew even more mysterious, retreating further into their shadows and speaking less and less at council meetings, and Earth went dark. It happened gradually at first. so slowly that nobody really noticed. The human trading posts on the edge of council space closed their doors, one by one, their staff returning to Sol System with no explanation. The observation satellites that other species had placed near human territory stopped transmitting, their signals replaced by static. The human ambassador's office on Nexus Prime emptied out, the staff departing quietly in the night, leaving behind only clean desks and silent rooms. Within 5 years of the council vote, humanity had completely withdrawn from galactic society. No communications, no trade, no diplomatic contact of any kind. Just silence. At first, the council did not care. Weak species often retreated after rejection, nursing their wounds in isolation until they either evolved or went extinct. It was the natural order of things. But as the years passed, strange reports began to filter in from the edges of human space. A Vorex merchant vessel passing through a system near Sol reported unusual energy readings, massive power signatures that did not match any known technology. The ship's sensors had detected what appeared to be construction on a scale that should have been impossible for a Category 7 species. The merchant was laughed out of the Vorex Admiralty office. Then a Thrall scout observed something even stranger. A gravity well had appeared where no gravity well should exist, somewhere between Jupiter and Saturn. It was there for exactly 3 hours before vanishing completely. As if someone had created a small star and then simply turned it off, the Thrall kept this information to themselves, as they kept most information to themselves. 30 years after the council vote, the Axiom Collective grew curious enough to send a research vessel to Sol System. The ship was called the Eternal Question, crewed by 7 of the Collective's finest scientists, equipped with sensors capable of detecting a single atom from a light year away. It entered human space broadcasting peaceful intentions and scientific curiosity. 3 weeks later it returned. The crew refused to discuss what they had seen. The lead scientist, a being called Resonance 7, went directly to the Axiom representative on the council and spoke with them for 6 hours behind closed doors. When the meeting ended, Resonance 7 retired from active research and was never seen in public again. The Axiom representative called for a vote on a simple matter. Should the council leave humanity alone? The vote passed without opposition. No explanation was given. No records were released. No details were shared. The other species noticed. Of course, they noticed that the Axiom, who feared nothing and questioned everything, had suddenly become very interested in not discussing Earth. They noticed that the Thrall, who collected secrets like others collected currency, had stopped sending scouts anywhere near human space. They noticed that ships passing within 10 light years of Sol sometimes experienced sensor malfunctions, their instruments detecting things that could not possibly exist. But noticing was not the same as caring. And the galaxy had other concerns. The Keth swarm was moving. The Keth were not a council species. They were not a species at all in the way the council understood the term. They were a collective, a hunger given form, a biological machine designed by evolution for one purpose: consumption. They had emerged from the Galactic Rim 40 years ago, devouring everything in their path. Their hive ships numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Their individual organisms numbered in the trillions. They did not negotiate, did not communicate, did not want anything except to feed. For decades, they had been a distant problem, consuming only minor species in regions the Council did not care about. But now they were heading toward Vorex space. The Vorex Dominion, for all its power and pride, found itself facing an enemy that could not be intimidated, could not be bought, could not be reasoned with. The war began badly and grew worse. Vorex border worlds fell one after another, their populations consumed, their resources stripped, their planets left as dead husks floating in empty space. The Council convened emergency sessions. Alliances were formed. Resources were pooled. The greatest military minds in the galaxy developed. Strategies and counter-strategies. Nothing worked. The Keth adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every defense. They learned. They evolved. They kept coming. In desperation, the Vorax High Command proposed a solution that made even their allies uncomfortable. The humans. Admiral Kethral the Younger said at a council military meeting, his scales pale with exhaustion and fear. They have a large population. They breed quickly. They are expendable. We propose conscripting their species as auxiliary forces, cannon fodder, essentially. Enough bodies between our fleets and the swarm to buy us time to develop better weapons. The proposal was debated for 3 days in the end. It was approved, not because anyone thought the humans would make good soldiers, but because no one could think of a reason to object. A Vorax diplomatic vessel was dispatched to Sol System, carrying an offer that was really a demand. Serve us or be declared enemies of the Council. The ship's name was the Inevitable, and it carried 200 Vorax warriors in addition to its diplomatic staff. It entered human space, broadcasting the Council's authority and demanding a response. No response came. The Inevitable proceeded deeper into the system, past the outer planets, past the asteroid belt, toward Earth itself. Its captain sent increasingly angry messages. Its warriors prepared for what they assumed would be an easy conquest. Then the ship simply stopped transmitting. There was no distress call, no weapons fire, no explosion, no debris. The Inevitable was there, and then it was not. As if reality itself had decided the ship no longer needed to exist, the Council received a single message 3 days later, broadcast on every frequency simultaneously. In every language used by every species, it was the first communication from Earth in 50 years. It contained only 4 words. Do not return uninvited. The galaxy began to pay attention. And in the silent depths of Sol System, where shadows moved and impossible things had become commonplace, humanity continued its work. The Keth swarm was coming. The Council was falling. The galaxy was burning, and humanity was almost ready. The Vorax homeworld burned on a Tuesday. Not that the Vorax used that name for the day, but the humans who watched from very far away did. And they recorded the event with that notation in their files. 12 billion Vorax had lived on that world. Their civilization had spanned 40,000 years. They had conquered 100 species and ruled an empire that stretched across 3 galactic arms. The Keth swarm consumed it all in 6 hours. The hive ships descended like a living storm, billions upon billions of organisms falling from orbit like rain. Each one a perfect eating machine. Each one connected to the greater whole. Each one driven by a hunger that had no end when the swarm lifted again. There was nothing left but bare rock and silence, the Vorax dominion. Once the mightiest power in the known galaxy ceased to exist as a meaningful force, scattered fleets fled in every direction, carrying the survivors of a species that had once looked down on all others. The Keth did not pursue them. There was no need. They would find the survivors eventually. They always did. Instead, the swarm gathered itself and turned toward its next target. Sol System Council observers had been tracking the swarm's movement for months, placing sensor platforms and relay stations at safe distances to monitor the approach. They understood what was about to happen: a Category 7 species with no defenses, no military, and no friends was about to be wiped from existence. Some of the observers felt something like pity. Humans had never done anything to deserve this fate. They had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others felt nothing at all. This was the way of the galaxy. The weak were consumed. The strong survived. The swarm armada that entered human space was the largest ever assembled. 10,000 hive ships, each one carrying millions of Keth organisms. Each one a self-contained ecosystem of death. They had consumed the Vorax, they had consumed a dozen other species. They had never been defeated. They would feed on humanity and then move on to the next meal. The observer platforms recorded everything. They recorded the Armada's approach to Jupiter. Formation perfect, signals coordinated, moving as one vast organism. They recorded the moment the Armada detected something emerging from fold space near the gas giant. They recorded the confusion in the swarm's communications. As their sensors tried to make sense of what they were seeing, it was a sphere, just a sphere, black as the void between stars, 5 kilometers in diameter. It hung in space like a hole in reality, giving off no heat, no radiation, no signals of any kind. The observers ran their sensors at maximum power and detected nothing. The sphere was not just black in the visual spectrum. It was black in every spectrum. It absorbed everything that touched it. Light and radiation and sensor pulses alike, the swarm did not hesitate. 10,000 hive ships opened fire simultaneously. Biological missiles, kinetic projectiles, plasma bursts, everything the Keth had in their considerable arsenal. The barrage was so intense that the observers' sensors temporarily overloaded when they recovered. They expected to see debris, expected to see the sphere shattered into a million pieces. The sphere was undamaged. It had not moved, had not reacted, had not defended itself in any visible way. The attacks had simply stopped existing when they touched its surface, absorbed into that perfect blackness like water into sand. For the first time in their existence, the Keth paused. Then the sphere spoke, not through communication channels, not through radio waves or quantum entanglement or any technology. The observers recognized the sphere spoke directly into minds. Every living thing within 10 light years heard the words, heard them in their own language, in their own mental voice, as if the thoughts had always been there. You were not invited. The observers would later struggle to describe what happened. Next, the word destruction was not accurate. Destruction implied violence, implied energy, implied a process that took time. This was different. The Keth Armada simply stopped existing. One moment there were 10,000 ships and trillions of organisms. The next moment there was empty space. No explosions, no debris, no screaming on communications channels. Just absence. The energy that had comprised those ships and those organisms had to go somewhere, and it went into the sphere. The observers detected a brief spike in gravitational readings as the sphere absorbed more mass than some stars contained. Then even that was gone. The sphere turned. It had no visible features, no way to indicate direction, but somehow everyone watching knew it was looking at them. Tell them, it said. And again the words appeared directly in their minds, that humanity accepts visitors now. The Council may send representatives to discuss revised terms. Then it folded back into whatever dimension it had come from. The observers sat in silence for a very long time. Eventually, one of them, a young Thrall scientist on her first assignment, said what everyone was thinking. What have they become? Nobody had an answer. But everyone understood that the galaxy had just changed forever. The Keth swarm, the greatest threat civilization had ever faced, had been eliminated in 37 seconds by a single ship from a Category 7 species, and somewhere in the Sol system. Humanity was waiting to see what the Council would do next. The Council delegation approached Sol system with the caution of creatures walking into a predator's den. There were 12 ships in the convoy, one from each elder species, each carrying their finest diplomats and their most advanced sensors. None carried weapons. Weapons seemed pointless now. They passed Neptune and found it unchanged, a blue giant spinning in the darkness as it had for billions of years. They passed Uranus and Saturn and felt their sensors struggling against interference that seemed almost playful, as if something was gently reminding them that they were being watched. Then they reached Jupiter, and they saw the first sign of what humanity had become, A ring encircled the gas giant. A ring made of metal and light, and something else their sensors could not identify. It was 300,000 kilometers in diameter and glowed with energy readings that should have been impossible. The ring was a shipyard. They could see vessels being constructed in its embrace. Ships that dwarfed the largest council dreadnoughts. Ships that moved without visible engines. Ships that seemed to flicker between dimensions like images in a broken display. The delegation continued toward Earth in silence. Mars stopped them next. The red planet was no longer red. It was green and blue, covered in oceans and forests that should have taken millions of years to develop. Cities dotted its surface, connected by transportation networks that moved faster than light itself. How was this possible? How could any species terraform an entire world in 50 years? Venus answered that question in a way that made several delegates physically ill. The hellish planet had been cooled. Its crushing atmosphere had been thinned. Its surface, once hot enough to melt lead, now supported lakes of liquid water that reflected the light of orbital habitats. A message reached the convoy as they approached the asteroid belt. "Welcome to Sol System," it said in perfect Vorix. Then repeated in Axiom, then Threll. Then every other language used by every delegate on every ship. "Please proceed to Earth orbit. Ambassador Vasquez is waiting for you." The asteroid belt was no longer a belt. It had been organized into geometric patterns. Vast shapes that served purposes the delegates could not begin to understand. Mining operations extracted resources on a scale that would have taken the Council centuries to achieve. Automated systems processed materials and sent them flowing toward construction projects throughout the system. And then, finally, they saw Earth. The birthplace of humanity was wrapped in a lattice of orbital structures. Silver and gold, beautiful and terrible. They formed patterns that hurt to look at directly. Shapes that suggested mathematics the Council had never discovered. The delegates landed on a platform that floated in orbit, supported by nothing visible, surrounded by a breathable atmosphere that had no right to exist in the vacuum of space. And there, waiting for them, was Ambassador Elena Vasquez. She looked exactly as she had 50 years ago. Gray hair, calm eyes, that same quiet smile. "That is impossible," the Axiom representative said, their voice trembling through their environmental suit. "Your species lives less than 100 years. You should be dead." "I was," Vasquez replied. "Twice, actually." It did not take. She gestured for them to follow her, and they did. Because what else could they do? The tour took 3 hours. They saw laboratories where humans worked alongside, artificial intelligences of staggering complexity. Machines that thought faster than any organic mind could comprehend. They saw manufacturing facilities, where matter was created from energy, where the fundamental building blocks of reality were assembled and disassembled like children's toys. They saw medical bays, where consciousness was transferred between bodies, where death had become a minor inconvenience rather than an ending. They saw training centers where children, human children, learned to fold probability like paper, adjusting the likelihood of events with nothing but concentration and will. "How?" the Thrall representative finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How is any of this possible?" Vasquez stopped walking and turned to face them all. "You declared us weak," she said. "You were right. We had no natural weapons. We had no psionic abilities. We had no innate advantages that evolution had granted to your species." She spread her hands, indicating everything around them. "So we built our own." The delegates stared at her. "When you rejected us, we realized something important," Vasquez continued. "We realized that playing by your rules would always leave us subordinate. We would always be catching up, always be behind, always be the weak species begging for scraps from the strong." She smiled, and there was something in that smile that made even the Varix representative take a step backward. So we stopped playing. We turned inward. We took every resource, every mind, every ounce of human stubbornness and creativity, and we focused it on a single goal. What goal? The axiom asked. Transcendence. The word hung in the air. We solved death first, Vasquez said. Not biological immortality. That is too fragile, too dependent on bodies that can be damaged. Instead, we learned to transfer consciousness, to store minds in substrates that cannot be destroyed. I have died twice and been restored from backup both times. Most humans now exist in multiple forms simultaneously. She began walking again, leading them through corridors that seemed to stretch and compress in ways that defied geometry. Then we cracked energy production, zero-point extraction, vacuum energy harvesting, methods of gathering power that your scientists believe are theoretically impossible. We have more energy available to us now than most species use in a million years. They passed a window that looked out on something that was not space, something that was color and movement and pattern, a dimension that had no name in any council language. Then we started exploring, Vasquez said. Not just space, not just our own dimension. We found others. We found places where the rules are different, where physics is negotiable, where thought and reality are not as separate as you believe. She stopped at a final door. We were quiet for 50 years because we had nothing to say. We were not hiding in shame. We were not nursing wounded pride. The door opened onto a view of Earth itself, blue and green and beautiful, spinning slowly beneath them. We were building. And now we are finished building, and now we have something to say. The delegates looked at each other, looked at the transformed world below them, looked at the human woman who had somehow lived for over 100 years and smiled like someone who knew secrets the universe had not yet revealed. What do you want from us? The Vorix representative asked. His voice small and afraid. Vasquez looked at him with something that might have been pity. We will discuss that at the council meeting. For now, rest, recover, prepare yourselves for what comes next. She turned and walked away, leaving them alone with their fear and their wonder and the growing realization that everything they thought they knew about the galaxy was wrong. The Galactic Council had not met in full session since the fall of the Vorix homeworld. Now, every species that remained gathered in the great chamber of Nexus Prime, filling seats that had been empty for months. Their attention focused on the speaking platform, where matters of galactic importance were decided. The atmosphere was thick with fear. Everyone had heard the stories, had seen the recordings from the observer platforms, had learned what humanity had done to the Keth swarm and what they had built in the silence of their system. Everyone expected demands, expected conquest, expected revenge for the humiliation of 50 years ago. Ambassador Elena. Vasquez walked to the speaking platform alone. She looked small standing there, surrounded by the representatives of species that had once dismissed her people as weak and irrelevant. But there was no fear in her eyes, no anger, no triumph, just calm. 50 years ago I stood in this chamber and listened while you declared humanity unworthy of respect. She began, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. You called us weak. You called us primitive. You laughed at our short lives and our soft bodies and our lack of natural weapons. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled representatives. You were not wrong. Confusion rippled through the chamber. We are weak, Vasquez continued. Individually, we break. We sicken, we die. Our bodies have no armor, no venom, no claws. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. And we survived not because we were strong, but because we were too stubborn to admit defeat. She smiled. And it was the same smile she had worn 50 years ago, as she left this chamber in supposed disgrace. You evolved natural advantages, scales and shells and poison glands and psionic powers. Your bodies adapted to your environments, became weapons themselves. You looked at us and saw creatures with none of those things. And you concluded that we were inferior. She shook her head slowly. You missed the point. The chamber was absolutely silent. Weakness taught us something strength never could, Vasquez said. It taught us that survival requires cooperation. It taught us that what one human cannot do, 100 humans working together can accomplish. It taught us to build tools because our hands were not weapons, to create technology because our bodies were not sufficient. She spread her hands, indicating the chamber, the station, the galaxy itself. You spent millennia perfecting what evolution gave you. We spent millennia replacing what evolution denied us, and because we started with nothing, we had no limits on what we could become. The Axiom representative spoke up, their voice trembling through their environmental suit. The Keth swarm, they said. What did you do to them? Vasquez turned to face the Axiom directly. We did not destroy them. Shock rippled through the chamber. The Keth in that armada are alive, Vasquez continued. All of them. Every single organism that attacked our system is currently living in a pocket dimension we created for that purpose. It is a space where they can exist without needing to consume other species, where they can feed on energy we provide, where they can live in peace. Why? The Thrall representative whispered. Because we could, Vasquez said simply. Because we had the power to destroy them, but chose not to. Because we learned long ago that the measure of strength is not what you can kill. It is what you can protect, what you can build, what you can forgive. She turned back to address the full council. You want to know what we want. You have been waiting for demands, for threats, for the inevitable conquest that your history tells you must follow such power. She paused. We want what we have always wanted. To explore, to learn, to grow. To find friends in the dark spaces between stars. The delegates stared at her in disbelief. Our terms are simple, Vasquez said. Equal partnership in the council, full membership, with all rights and responsibilities that entails, open borders for trade and travel, and access to our technology, freely given. To any species that asks, freely given, the Vorax representative repeated. His voice cracked and broken. He was young, one of the survivors of the scattered remnants of his once mighty species. After what my people did, after what we proposed, your people proposed conscripting us as cannon fodder. Vasquez agreed. Your ship entered our space without permission and was removed. Those actions were taken by a government that no longer exists, by individuals who are now dead. You are not responsible for the sins of your ancestors. She looked at him with something that might have been compassion. We saved your species, she said. When the Vorax fleets fled the swarm, we guided them to safe systems. We provided supplies and medical care and protection. There are 3 million Vorax alive today who would not be alive without our intervention. Why? The young Vorax asked, and his voice was breaking. Why would you help us after everything? Vasquez stepped down from the speaking platform and walked toward him. The other delegates drew back. But she ignored them, stopping directly in front of the Vorax representative. Because you needed help, she said. And we were strong enough to give it. She reached out and placed a human hand on his scaled arm. That is what strength is for. Not conquest, not revenge, not dominion. Strength exists so that those who have it can protect those who do not. So that the powerful can lift up the weak instead of crushing them. She turned and walked back to the platform. 50 years ago, you called us weak. And we responded with silence. We did not argue because argument would have been pointless. We did not protest because protest would have changed nothing. We did not threaten because threats require strength. And we had none. She faced the council one final time. We responded with silence because we had nothing to prove. We still have nothing to prove, but we thought, after all this time, you might like to know who your neighbors really are. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 8,000 years, every single species on the Galactic Council voted the same way. Humanity was admitted as a full member, with all rights and privileges. Their technology and resources offered freely to any species that wanted to share in their advances. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, the young Vorax approached Ambassador Vasquez one more time. "I do not understand," he said. "We mocked you. We rejected you. We tried to enslave you. And you respond with kindness, with generosity, with forgiveness." Vasquez smiled at him. And in that smile was the weight of 50 years of work, of sacrifice, of a species that had transformed itself into something new. "There is nothing to understand," she said. "This is simply what humanity is. We were weak, and weakness taught us compassion. We were fragile, and fragility taught us to protect others. We were mortal, and mortality taught us that every moment matters." She began to walk away, then stopped and looked back. "You want to know the secret of human strength? The real secret?" The young Vorax nodded. "We never forgot what it felt like to be weak," Vasquez said. "And we promised ourselves that if we ever became strong, we would never make others feel the way you made us feel in this chamber 50 years ago." She walked through the doors, leaving behind a council that was only beginning to understand the truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply been patient. And now they were here to help the end.